Hey everyone, how you doing? It's Russell. Welcome to the Reading Fabricator. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you're all reading lots of books. And today I'm going to talk about Less Than Zero by Bret Easton Ellis, the Wonderkin writer who published this when he was 21, wrote it around the time he was 19 while still a college student. It's truly astonishing reading this type of work, knowing that a 19-year-old wrote this. He was really ahead of his time with that regard. And even though he himself admitted that there are passages which could have been more elegantly written, I think as a first-time novel, particularly for someone in their late teens to early 20s when they published it, it is a great debut, and a very disturbing one as well. There are certain portions of this book which I think really speak to the way youth culture is heading, which, considering this came out in the 80s, is really disturbing indeed. And there have been some people who have said this has been the precursor to like the Kardashians and Paris Hilton and that sort of thing, which I can definitely see. And yeah, that's what I've referred to this book as, is quite a disturbing read of a bunch of college students who are just engaged in all these activities in which their parents seem to be never around or are just completely oblivious to what is going on. Rich, spoiled kids who just seem to be able to get away with anything and everything, and who seem to be off their heads on drugs and infatuated with sex and death. It's all get laid out for you in this book, in this very relatively short book, almost a novella of sorts. I mean, you could read this thing in 4 hours if you wanted to. And it's been a long time since I've read this. I mean, this was my first Ellis book. I read it about 5 years ago. It was my introduction to his work, so to speak, and then from there I proceeded to read like American Psycho, and then The Rules of Attraction, The Informers, and my personal favorite actually, which is Luna Park, which is a very meta book. If you haven't read that, I recommend that book, although in order to get a full appreciation of it, you probably have to read everything that he's written beforehand before getting to that one there, because a lot of it takes place in the first 40 pages with regards to talking about his life story in an almost fictionalized sense, especially with regards to his father. And I've seen that a lot in his work, where he seems to blend fact and fiction with regards to his life. And in particular with his new book, the colossally thick The Shards, by far his thickest book. And I'm really looking forward to getting this. But I hear it's a combination of Less Than Zero and American Psycho, incorporating that college, almost that high school youth college culture with the serial killer aspect of American Psycho, which, bringing those two together, I think is a fantastic idea, and I'm really looking forward to reading it. And from what I've heard, it's actually one of his better works, if not his best, which I'm really looking forward to getting to. But getting back to Less Than Zero, I mean, it's the story of Clay, who's been over east, and I think in New Hampshire at an arts college. He's the only one that's over there. Everyone else stayed in Los Angeles, and he comes back to Los Angeles for a month over the Christmas break at the end of his semester at school. And at first, for the first 50 or so pages, I was very unsure to make of him. Now, I do preface this by saying I have read it before, but it's been a long time since I've read this that I just forgotten everything. So I'm sort of entering this with new eyes, and there's almost like a numbing experience with him, or just he seems to be devoid of emotions. At least that's what I interpreted when I was first reading this. And then slowly he begins to reveal himself as the book goes on, particularly with regards to certain scenes that involve a psychiatrist that he goes to see. And with these psychiatrist sessions, not the first one that he goes to, I think the second one, he sort of breaks down crying. And it's a really eye-opening read, because the psychiatrist seems to be all about himself. He's talking about getting a screenplay done and submitting it and getting it made, and he wants Clay's help, but Clay is there crying, asking for his help, and he seems to be so into himself that he doesn't see the pain that is afflicting his patient. And it's just little bits like that that are just dropped throughout the book, where you realize that Clay isn't quite as numbed out as you think he is, or devoid of emotion, but he's certainly getting that way. He's certainly on the path to getting to that position there. And I'm not sure if it continues in Imperial Bedrooms, because Imperial Bedrooms, I read about a third of it and then I just threw it on the floor because I just absolutely hated everything about it. And I do mean to get back to it, because I do intend on reading everything by Ellis, including Glamour, which is probably his second longest book. So I'm not sure whether or not this numbness or this devoid of emotion is expanded upon in Imperial Bedrooms, but it seems to be hinted at here, in particular with his relationships with various affiliations that he knew through high school. Probably the most fascinating of which is the two characters, Julian and Blair. Blair, he had sort of a romantic relationship with in the past, and seeing them reconnect is quite fascinating. But in particular with Julian, who's described the same way as every other character in this book. I mean, bleached blonde hair, suntan to the point where they just look like they're burnt. Everyone in this book is described as blonde and suntanned. And seeing him interact with these various characters, including Trent and Rip and all that, going to these different clubs, going to the movies, driving all around LA. So with this book, with this 160-page book, he gives you almost a roadmap of LA. He's going down all these various streets to these various places of which I actually have heard of, and I think I'd been to when I was younger. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I was in LA, but he gives you the city, and it really got me into the story. And what I thought was quite fascinating was his use of motifs. And at the very start of the book, he's talking about merging on the freeway, that no one knows how to merge on the freeway. And then not long after that, he talks about seeing a billboard that says disappear here. And I didn't know what to make of those two things when I thought they were just throwaway lines. But then they come back, and they keep coming back. He keeps referring back to them, and I thought, oh, okay, so so I see what he's doing here. And I'm thinking, wow, a 19-year-old wrote this, published it when he was 21, but at the time, a 19-year-old wrote this, and this is very creatively written. Especially with the billboard that said disappear here, the way it was described, for some strange reason, there's probably no connection whatsoever, but it reminded me a lot of that billboard thing that's out of The Great Gatsby, with the dentist and the glasses. I don't know why it reminded me of that, but there's that too. And also with the choice of naming a female character after a boy's name, which reminded me a lot of The Sun Also Rises, Ernest Hemingway Sun Also Rises, with the character Lady Bret Ashley. So I'm not sure if he's trying to make some sort of connection with that book there. That book there being, of the lost generation in the 1920s. And it was almost reviled upon when it came out. I mean, it was a beloved bestseller, but at the time it sort of caused a bit of an uproar with its depiction of debauchery. Just like this book did when it came out, its depiction of debauchery sort of caused a bit of an uproar of sorts. And so I'm wondering if there's a bit of a connection there, whether Bret was a massive fan of Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald. I know he was a fan of Leo Tolstoy, but I don't see any connections there whatsoever. But in particular with Lesson Zero and The Sun Also Rises, and I probably should have read those back to back. That would have been a very interesting connection right there. Interesting segue. But what I also found with Less Than Zero is, as the book progresses, it gets more and more bleaker, more and more abstract, and more heinous. There are some acts in the second half of the book onwards through to the very end where I'm like, oh my god, this is disturbing. These kids are in their late teens, early 20s, and they are doing shit that I would never have engaged in when I was a kid. I mean, to name a few, I mean, they experience watching a snuff film. They talk about the dead body that's in the alleyway behind a club. There's one of the side characters, I won't say who, but one of the side characters engages in homosexual activity to pay off his debt. So he's basically being pimped out. And then probably the most shocking one of all takes place in the final 20 pages, which involves a girl in a bedroom. And I'm just going to leave it at that because I don't want to say any more. But his reactions to seeing these things, again, are all of devoid emotion. Like you can tell that he's a bit thrown off by it and that he doesn't approve of it, but he doesn't express himself a lot. And for that, I find Clay to be a really enigmatic character. There's just, I know he's there. I know there's something to him, but I can't penetrate his mind. And for some strange reason, that just makes me more interested in him. And it's with all these characters. All these characters seem to be just so into themselves about their attributions and aspects of life in LA and what their experiences with drugs and sex, that almost no one seems to be able to perceive the ramifications that come with that. They just want to be in the moment. And something about that just really hit me hard. It really, really did. Bret Easton Ellis has always been a favorite writer of mine. Apart from Imperial Bedrooms, which I do need to reread, he hasn't let me down yet. And as I said before, Luna Park is my favorite, mostly because it has an emotion in it that's, I wouldn't say lacking from his other work, but it's more front and center in the book with regards to him being a father of sorts. And the emotion in Less Than Zero is sparse. It's few and far between, but it is hinted at here and there, in particular with the second therapy session that Clay has, and with his thoughts about past experiences. Every so often it will cut back to him sort of giving a narration of a time long gone. In particular, all these sections that take place in Palm Springs when he was younger. One of which really caught my eye. So I'm going to read that one to you right now. During the end of my senior year one day, I didn't go to school. Instead, I drove out to Palm Springs alone and listened to a lot of old tapes I used to like but didn't much anymore. And I stopped at a McDonald's in Sunland for a Coke and then drove out to the desert and parked in front of the old house. I didn't like the new one that the family had bought. Well, it was okay, but it wasn't like the old house. The old house was empty and the outside looked really scummy and unkempt, and there were weeds and a television aerial that had fallen off the roof, and empty trash cans were lying on what used to be the front lawn. The pool was drained, and all these memories rushed back to me, and I had to sit down in my school uniform on the steps of the empty pool and cry. I remembered all the Friday nights driving in and Sunday nights leaving, and afternoons spent playing cards on the chaise lounge out by the pool with my grandmother, but those memories seemed faded compared to empty beer cans that were scattered all over the dead lawn and the windows that were all smashed and broken. My aunt had tried to sell the house, but I guess she got sentimental and no longer wanted to. My father had wanted to sell it and was really bitter that no one had done so, but they stopped talking about it and the house lay between them and was never brought up anymore. I didn't go out to Palm Springs that day to look around or see the house, and I didn't go because I wanted to miss school or anything. I guess I went out there because I wanted to remember the way things were. I don't know. And through that, I sort of just got this feeling that somewhere between then and the way he is now, coming back to LA after that semester, he's just shut off emotionally. And all that culminates in the final conversation he has with Blair in a restaurant before he leaves. And it is a truly heartbreaking moment. She's basically just constantly asking him, did you care about me? Did you care about me? And she's trying to, you could see him just not breaking. Then finally he breaks down and says that he never cared about her the way she did about him, even just a little bit. And for that, I think you could see from the beginning of the book through to the end, you could see that he's just, a part of him is lost. A part of him from when he was a kid is lost. And I wonder if that's a product of the way he was brought up, the way he interacted with people, the way he interacted with his friends when he was younger, and it sort of just reflected on him as he got older and sort of brought out these new personality traits in him. I'm not sure, maybe I'm looking too deep into it, but sections such as that one that I just described to you are reasons why I can't write this book off as not being emotional. There are sections in it, they're just a bit sparse and few in between. Instead, what you get is just acts of debauchery told from the point of view of people who should not be involved in these acts. And I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I think it's a great debut novel. I can see why it caused a fuss when it came out. I can see why it catapulted Bret into the stratosphere when it came to the literary scene. And from there, he continued to do Rules of Attraction, which is a book that is looking better to me every day after I read it. I mean, at the time, I didn't really like it, but now I love it. And even American Psycho, which I still maintain is a pretty decent piece of work also. 3 great books in a row, kicking off when he was in his 20s. He did good. And Less Than Zero, I think, is a fascinating read for people who want to... I don't know if transgressive fiction is the way to describe this book. I've heard people refer to him as transgressive, but certainly, I guess the most comparable experience, I guess, would be watching the show Euphoria. I mean, that's like the modern equivalent of Less Than Zero, I guess. But for a quick read that delves into the minds of, I don't know if nepotism is the way to use it, but kids who have been spoiled badly and who seem to have no true connection with their parents and seem to have been left to their own devices to run things as they are. for a book about that, it's very well written, and I wouldn't say tightly plotted because there's no real plot to it. Just a month in the life of Clay when he gets back for summer break. But in that month span, you get a whole host of events that will keep you invested in the book, and it will disturb you, and maybe even make you a bit sad as well. I know certain parts definitely made me feel a bit disheartened. But that is less than zero, and for the most part, I think with these rereads that I've been doing, I found that with the multiple rereads that I've been doing of books that I read in time long gone, I like them more the second time around. So I find that to be a really fascinating idea about rereading books that you loved it when you were younger, and just maybe it's an age thing where as you've gotten older, you've come to appreciate different literature or the thematics that are in them. But I've yet to come across a book that I've reread that I haven't liked more. I mean, Cormac McCarthy's a good example of that. All the Pretty Horses and No Country for Old Men I really liked when I was 5 years younger, but reading them now, I truly have come to appreciate them as fine works of art. And I guess I can count Lesson Zero among that. Another example of this emotion, this little tiny bit of emotion that you get from Clay's thought process, is in this paragraph when he's talking about an Elvis Costello poster, which is always being mentioned, that's hanging in his bedroom, where the eyes are always following you like the Mona Lisa. I'm standing by the door and I look over at the Elvis Costello poster, at his eyes, watching her, watching us, and I try to get away from it. So I tell her to come over here, sit down, and she thinks I want to hug her or something, and she comes over to me and puts her arms around my back and says something like, I think we've all lost some sort of feeling. So anyway, that's been Less Than Zero by Bret Easton Ellis. I do recommend this book, and if you've read it too, then let me know what you think of it. Thank you for watching, and yeah, I will eventually get to this mammoth. Maybe after my next book, which is probably going to be The Seawolf by Jack London, or The Crossing by Cormac McCarthy, which I've been slowly slogging through. Not that it's a bad book, it's a brilliant book, but I'm just taking my time with it to really get the feel of the writing. Hope you've enjoyed this, and yeah, see you on the next one. Bye.